Okay, YouTubers, this is Joe from ArtAlienTV. Now today I've got some new Gigapans for you people out there to check out. Some of you space detectives are going to be interested in this. There's this little Gigapan I've done here. It's just made up of 2 images. And this is from the SuperCam on the Perseverance rover. And these are round images and they can be stitched together like the others can. And that was interesting. I'll come back to that in a minute. A couple of things in here. And I've just uploaded recently this enhanced version of Sol 62, and I'm also going to show you some stuff from this video called Mars CSI Exposed Crypt Structure, because what we're seeing in this area now where we are in Jezero Crater is very similar to other parts of Mars, not just Gale Crater, but also parts of Mars that were photographed by the other rovers like the Opportunity and the Spirit rover. Now, this is from the Spirit rover, and this image goes back years, I think about 10 years, and basically similar things were found in images on very different parts of Mars, thousands of miles away from where we are right now. Okay, so I'll come back to that in a bit. This is Percy, Perseverance rover, Sol 68, SC. Now SC stands for SuperCam, okay? And we've got an enhanced clip here and a raw clip here, and also the thing I found. I'll show you the thing I found first. Now this isn't very clear. This is a long way away. But when you play with the contrast, you will be able to see it quite well, as long as you don't get in too close. But basically we have here another exposed burial, it looks like, with a head here, with long hair. Male or female, not sure. I've called this the long-haired man. It could be a woman. Don't know. There's not enough of him or her to say either way, really. We don't know. But I called it a long-haired man because it looks kind of male to me, but I could be wrong. So, like I said, we've got the raw clip here, and this is the enhanced clip. Not enhanced very much, I should say. And here's the overall enlarged version. This has been enhanced here, and what we have is in the background we have one of the hills in Jezero Crater just here with these strange markings on the ground that look a bit like tracks, some of them, and then we have this kind of mound and another sort of mound next to it. And in fact, if you zoom in here, you can see this pretty clearly without really doing much to it. If I use the hover zoom magnifier, you can see a nose here, mouth here, 2 eyes, and a head coming up here. And it looks like hair coming down the side here and here, either side. Okay? Interesting. Now that says to me that this thing can't be more than a couple of thousand years old. I mean, we do have mummies that have been found on Earth which are thousands of years old which still have hair. Is it possible that they could do that on Mars? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There's also, now after I uploaded this to the Gigapan site here, I noticed there's possibly a couple more here. One here and one here, but they're very vague, and I need to actually take a clip of that and enhance it for you to see if that comes out. And I'll do that before the end of the video. I'll put a clip in of those. Very strange. Now, these mounds are all over the place. In fact, Jezero's littered with them. Now, some of them are buildings, the tops of buildings or ruins, which are buried in sand, and some of them, I think, were burial structures. In other words, burial mounds with piles of rocks around them. And in between these rocks, you often see skulls and remains of burials. Now, I think they were using quite crude burial mounds a lot of the time. I have shown in the past some quite sophisticated coffins and sarcophagi, but I've also shown burial dolmens before in a number of videos going back many years now on Mars, where they were just literally making crude structures from stones and then piling them up in a sort of around the body, and then perhaps putting larger sort of flat slabs over the top, like a burial dolmen, like you might see in Europe or anywhere around the world. In fact, they're very common. very crude structures, and I think basically they were literally, they would sort of dig a pit, line it with smaller rocks, and then put large rocks around it, and perhaps a large rock on top, or two maybe, and then cover it in sand. Literally just chuck the sand over it, and that would be a burial dolmen, or just a crude burial mound. Okay, there's one here, and this, like I said, this is the spirit rover, I think, and I'll show you a bit of this video now, because what we have here is one of these mounds. This is a close-up of one of these mounds, and this one happens to have small chambers in a row here, which I'm going to show you now. Okay, it's going to zoom in, and then it will highlight each one. Okay, coming up. This is the find that I found next to it. Now this looks very strange. I don't think this is the remains of a person. This is a carving, but this is a skull here. Okay. This is from 2020, May, about a year ago, this one. Not very clear, some of this stuff. The Spirit Rover images, this is from Spirit Soul 692. The Spirit Rover images are really poor quality and very dark, and you really have to brighten them a hell of a lot to see anything at all. Right, now this is one of these burial structures. We got a chamber here, another one coming up here, and another one here. Very crude, eroded, and dilapidated. Okay, but I don't think they were that sophisticated to start with. Nowhere near as sophisticated as something like this crypt here on Earth, which dates back about 1,000 years. Much more like this crude burial in the Middle East here, where you would have a basic structure. Let's go back a bit. Let's go back to that. Let me freeze frame that. Now, this in fact is probably more sophisticated than a lot of the ones we're seeing, where you literally have a little set of walls in a sort of square or box shape in a rectangle. Sometimes they're circular. In the Peruvian burials that we found, going back thousands of years, in places like Nazca, where the large conehead skulls are, they have circular burial pits. And in some countries they would have square ones, some they'd have rectangular ones. Sometimes they were buried sitting, sometimes they were buried lying down, sometimes the head was separated and put in a separate chamber to the rest of the bones, and the bones were often put in a random chamber, all piled up together with all the others. There's different ways of doing this with different cultures, and I would expect similar differences on Mars between the different cultures that were there. I'm not saying they were all using the same burial techniques, because I've shown at least 3 or 4 already. Some, like I said, with sarcophagi, more advanced mummification, some buried in sitting positions, some had their heads removed and placed in a little box, like a stone box with very crude sides, made with just little slabs of rock, okay, and perhaps a slab put over the top. And I have shown examples of these, and there are many, many different types of burials on Earth. I would expect the same on Mars, from the different cultures or different periods, different time periods, over many, many thousands or perhaps even millions of years, okay? Because I'm pretty sure they were there a very long time, and they would have adapted different rituals and different techniques for burials and stuff like that over many thousands of years, okay? So that's highly possible. So this is I would call a sort of fairly crude one. I think many of them were like this, but perhaps with stone structures in between as well, where they would bury the first person and cover it, then another, and these would gradually build up. And often you would have some buried sitting on the side like this, or lying down in the middle. And of course this would then erode away. And what you would see then would be various parts of burials exposed, sometimes at the top, sometimes at the bottom, sometimes halfway up. And this would explain why on a lot of these so-called buttes and mounds that we're seeing, not only in Jezero, but also I've shown dozens and dozens in Jezero Crater. This would explain why you see skulls at the top, halfway down, and at the bottom. And often you see figurines and carved heads as well, which are often buried with the people, I think, as grave markers, or ceremonial, for ceremonial reasons, I don't know, often perhaps burial masks and things like this, but often little figurines and statuettes and other things that were buried with them, including weaponry. So this is similar to what I think we're seeing in Jezero Crater, but there's a lot more than that going on here, because there's also buried structures in the ground. You see these long lines of what are just seemingly rocks. I'm sure a lot of these are walls we're looking at here, but we're only seeing buried stuff. So basically, we got a lot of material and sand and debris in between some of these structures, and some of these were actually burial mounds that may have been put there much later. So we may have multiple layers of civilizations coming and going, and then using the same ground, possibly living there, and then later using it, possibly even a rubbish tip or a burial area. And if you were to dig through the various levels of strata here and go down 20 or 30 feet down, or perhaps 50 feet down, you would probably find that there are layers and layers of civilizations who lived in the same area on top of each other, okay, as we see in places on Earth. You can see the remains of a corpse here with a head and shoulders, just here. There's the head, there's the shoulder, and this is the back, and there's probably a body in here just lying down, face down. Well, the body's face down, but the head is looking towards us. See some jagged mouth and teeth detail, an eye here, a very small nose, and another eye here. And this is the head going back, and this is the back here, and this is the shoulder or arm coming down here. So if you were to just remove some of this material, you would find probably a complete body there, or at least most of a body. Of course, a lot of this stuff has been moved around. Just because things are buried doesn't mean they don't move. The ground moves, the ground subsides. You would have, as Mars dried out, a lot of the ground would have shrunk and cracked and moved and subsided, and all sorts of things going on here. And a lot of the sand would have blown away or blown over these things over time. So this may not be an actual burial. This may just be where someone died and just fell on the ground, or fell on the ground and died. This may not be a proper burial. It's impossible to say. These images are littered with heads and statues and remains all over the place. So why would that be? Well, it must be a burial area, and it seems like they were burying these people everywhere. Or is it that NASA just happened to pick another burial ground to land on? Okay. Now there is a town or city near here that I've shown up in the background. You can see it, and I've shown it in previous videos. So maybe this was the burial area for them. This was a sort of graveyard, and you wouldn't necessarily have your graveyard right next to where you live. You'd have it a bit of a distance away. Usually on Earth we have them on the edge of town somewhere, you know, out of the way a bit usually, but not always, you know. So perhaps this whole area was later, after it was inhabited and then people left here, it was just used as a burial ground. We don't know. Impossible to say for sure either way, really, but there are, in the background up here, loads of these weird mounds sticking up, okay? And I'm pretty sure a lot of them will have burials on them, okay? If we were to see them more closely, these mounds everywhere. And there's another one here. And I'm pretty sure a lot of these are burial mounds. And I'm pretty sure a lot of them are just ruined structures in between as well. I'm just going to outline some of the details for you, just to make it obvious what we're looking at here. And it's not very clear, but it's pretty obvious to me what we're looking at. We've got a head coming up here with hair either side. The hair comes down like this. Here's the chin. Nice chin. Hair coming down here as well. You can see the edge of the face there. You can see the nose, you can see the mouth with a slight downturn, and quite big eyes there, showing there. And I think this is a parting here. So this may be a woman. Don't know. Absolutely no idea. Man or woman, but with long hair. Very interesting. There we are, and you can see that even in the raw image. You can see those details there. You can see the eye sockets and the nose and the mouth and the chin and the hair coming round like this, and this is kind of coming out this side like that. Very interesting. But this, like I said, this is a long way off, so we're not going to see amazing detail. What this camera has done, and what it often does, is take really long zoom, deep zoom shots like this one, and we'll zoom in on the background like half a mile or even a mile away, like it did with the recent video I showed with the bunker structure. We got like statues and weird things like skulls on the side of that as well. So this is what this thing looks like from the front and the side. Now the side view confirms precisely what I said it was in the front view here. Okay, and this can often be done, and I'm starting to do this now with the Perseverance rover, where it's gradually moving and we're seeing things from different angles, and often these things turn out to be what I thought they were, and sometimes they don't. You can't get it right all the time, but this, you can actually see that is a nose sticking out and a mouth with a chin there and the forehead sticking up there, which matches up exactly what we're seeing here. So this is 3D. This isn't 2D pareidolia. This is real. And basically, when you see the second angle or third angle on these things, it confirms what these things are. It confirms the shapes and morphology of the face and everything else, and how these things were possibly made and carved or mummified or whatever. Now, I'm just going to show you what I do with these images very quickly. Now, this is that image I just showed you. This is Sol 69. And this is masked left, so this is left mask cam. Okay. Now the first thing I do is go in and have a look at it. Now we've got these compression distortion lines here. So what's happening is the person who's processing these images at JPL, they get the raw image file, and then what they do is they crop the border off the top and the bottom. Okay, because they got a border on them, right? And then they save them once they've cropped them, but they're saving them as probably downgraded JPEGs. In other words, they're being compressed by about 25%, approximately, right? Because we've got these compression lines in here. These compression distortion lines are caused by downgrading the image. In other words, saving it as a lower quality format image, like a JPEG, right? This is what happens with JPEGs. That's why I don't use them. They're rubbish, right? And you've got all this distortion. So what you need to do to get rid of that distortion is blur the image very slightly. Now I use a Gaussian blur, but you can use any sort of blur really. You can use an average or whatever, but you need to just a tiny bit of blur. Now I use 0.6, 0.6, and then that gets rid of that distortion. There we are. So now we're seeing the pixels more like they were. Now we have lost a bit of information and a bit of sharpness, but that takes the distortion out of the image. So it's no good enhancing these images until you've gotten rid of the distortion. Because otherwise, all you're going to be doing is sharpening up and enhancing distortion and unreliable data. Okay, so this cleans up the data before it's enhanced. So now we can see this. Now, if I show you this now, it's been blurred very slightly. Now, if I unblur it, it's a real mess. You've got a lot of distortion in here. Okay, so that 0.6 blur, sometimes I use 0.5, sometimes 0.65, whatever, and sometimes I use a different type of blur. There's different types of blur you can use. You can use an average or whatever, but I use Gaussian because you can set the level exactly how you want, okay, but you really don't need to use very much. So that cleans it up. Then what I do is I enlarge it. Now what I'm doing now, which is a lot quicker, rather than changing that number, is use a percentage. What you normally do is double it. So I stick 200 in the percent box there and then double the size, okay? Now, that tends to smooth out a bit and look a bit soft. So what I do then is I sharpen it, just a little bit, just to give us a bit of detail. Now, this still doesn't look great because this is about a mile away, and it's still got the orange filter on it, right? So to get rid of the orange filter, I will then adjust the colour, usually automatic colour balance, and I set it near sunlight here, right, which will make it bluer. You don't go too blue, it's about there somewhere normally. Now that makes it much more natural looking and easier to look at, okay? closer to the actual real colour. And then I add contrast. And this is all I do. And I normally add, my standard setting is -25 plus 25. -25 brightness, so it's darker, and then contrast up 25, okay? And that's it. And that's normally all I do. Sometimes I add a bit of extra brightness depending on the image. Let's go a little bit brighter, +10, +10. Okay, that's it. That's all I do, all right? Now sometimes if I'm looking at something like this, I might go a bit darker again, just to bring out the shadows in here and shapes, okay? But this image isn't great. Not a great image. It's a bit grungy and it's not very clear, but this stuff's a long way off, right? What I'm trying to get across is that these things are all over Mars and have been spotted not only by this new rover, but by all the rovers. And basically they're all over the planet Mars on the surface. And we got these chambers, crude chambers where they were sticking heads or skulls in. And often there'd be a carving or burial mass. This burial mass may have covered this chamber here, in front of it, like a sort of like a door, like a marker, like a carving of a person in front like this. Okay, so they're not the same as burials on Earth, but they're very similar. But I do think a lot of them had their heads separated, and a lot of them were buried sitting up. And I have shown some sitting up. There are many examples of these burials, and I think a lot of these things on Mars are exactly that, were exposed burials. There's that thing I showed you from Percy Sol 62. There we are. Look, there's the two eyes, a nose, and some jagged teeth and a chin there. Not a lot of detail in there, but that's what it looks like. It's kind of mummified and semi-fossilized by the looks of it. Okay, in the minerals that are in the crater, and there's all these weird things all over the place, and like I said with this one here in a recent video, this one here, a lot of these are animals lying around as well, and I called this the hell ape. But the problem is, if this is an ape, where are the brow ridges? So this could be, some people said it looks like a pig, some people said it looks like a hippo, could be anything. I'm only comparing some of the sort of facial details to various things, but some of it just doesn't match anything. This could be almost anything. So there's weird creatures as well. There's weird creatures lying around, remains of, you know, as well as all these burials and buried structures and statues and things like that, and figurines. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Please give the thumbs up, and if you can't leave a comment, leave an emoji, okay, because that will count as a comment. So thanks for watching. I will see you soon.